You're listening to Barbell Logic,
the podcast where we talk about what it means to experience strength
and how you can use simple, hard, and effective strategies in training and nutrition to improve your life.
It starts with meeting you where you are right now and finding lasting solutions.
Welcome to the show.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Barbell Logic podcast. I'm Niki Sims here with CJ,
Ahoy,
who directs our academy. And we get to talk about something that is incredibly important for anybody who's thinking about being a coach or who already is a coach, or even if you've been coaching for a long time, which is finding your VIP, which we're going to define for you in a second, or really finding your purpose as a coach and why that's important. So welcome, CJ. It's great to have you and to talk about this.
Glad to be here.
So, CJ, what does VIP stand for in this context?
So in this context, VIP for values, identities, and priorities. And I think we don't need to make it too complicated. It's about, because I think we can sometimes all these different terms, different people use different terms, unique abilities, categories. It's about finding what we're about. What are we about as a coach? And there are ways of dialing into and asking systematic questions to get to what we're about.
Mm-hmm. And why is that important for someone to think deeply on?
I think it's important for everyone. I think we're all doing it, whether we like it or not, whether we think about it or not, or apply a system to it. When we're thinking, anytime we get upset about something, or we get, we find something really exciting that we want to participate in, it says something about our values, and our identities. Maybe we'll get into sort of details of what these are, but our identities are roles in our relationships in society and in our families. So as a father, a son, a coach, an athlete, whatever those may be, we choose those identities. And then what that means to us, that forms consciously or not. So whether you're a coach or not, really everyone is picking out and getting clarity on what these mean to me. How do I do this better? What does better even mean?
Have you found when someone first starts coaching, you see a lot of people go from what we call the barbell enthusiast, a client who wants to start dabbling in the academy and then really starts to consider coaching. Have you found that a lot of people already have these worked out already, or does it take some processing?
I would say no. For the most part, in some ways, no. Okay. In some ways, no. And in some ways, yes. Because when people start off and they're making that first transition, initially, usually they're serving family and friends, coworkers, people who they already know, this relationship, that click where they're like, oh, I could coach, I could help someone, or somebody's asking me to help. I've just been that guy in the gym. And then, they see me squatting 4 or 5 and they're like, oh, could you show me how to do that? That moment, the click, the purpose is very clear. I want them to experience the same kind of health, strength, satisfaction, that I got out of strength coaching. But once that first step becomes step 2, and they're like, maybe I take this professionally, maybe I help other people, maybe I talk about what I do, then that lack of clarity becomes clear. It's like, it's almost stepping off a cliff. It's a whole different, level of introspection and clarity that's missing.
Yeah. And I can see, or I know how that is important, because all of a sudden you go from doing something as your hobby to just kind of helping a friend out to dabbling to all of a sudden asking someone for money. And so you have to really shift your identity to look like an expert and to act like a professional and to really look like you have all your stuff together.
Well, and that's funny you mentioned that, because it is the identity shift.
Yeah.
It's easier for me, and maybe when the stakes are low, oftentimes we don't reflect on our identity. I don't think of I don't have to think about the relationship I have with my food. When I'm cooking in this moment, the family needs food. Dinner's at 6. I'm making it food, right? But if I'm a professional chef, then all of a sudden the relationship that I have with my cooking, my sous chefs and my team and all these different pieces, all of a sudden having poorly thought out relationships or bad relationships that aren't aligned with how I want to operate, that has consequences. So yeah, that jump, and just even the fact, values, identities, priorities, the identity shift to being a professional. Oof.
Yeah.
I have to ask all sorts of questions. Like you said, what does that mean?
Yeah. You kind of start taking responsibility for different things, right?
Yeah.
Like what you know, what you don't know, what you promise you can do for someone.
Yeah. Things that weren't in your domain. When you're a friend, if you're a friend, and you're helping somebody squat and their squat doesn't really go up all that much, but there's no exchange. You had social time while you were together. You kind of got everything out of the experience that you wanted, even if their squat didn't go up, you had a connection. When you're promising, that changes.
Yeah. And you also said something, as the stakes get higher, what are various examples of when the stakes get higher, aside from shifting to wanting to get paid for this?
Yeah, that's a good question. What changes? Because there's so many different ways to change stakes, depending on where they are in the coach's path. You could have somebody who's been working with Gen Pop, quote unquote, whatever that means, and all of a sudden a athlete, like a semi-professional or a rec pro, or something like that, athlete walks in the door, their stakes are higher. Do I take them on?
Mm-hmm.
Like the consequences, if somebody didn't succeed, okay, they didn't lose 10 pounds or they didn't gain 50 pounds on their squat. We accept that. If this person doesn't win competing with other people, they lose out on money. They lose out on, sponsorships, on something that really matters to them.
Mm-hmm.
Or if we make that shift from coaching as a side hustle to coaching as a full-time profession, we see that a lot through the Barbell Academy. People who they're not coaching at all professionally, and then they pick up like 5 clients. It's enough to be making an additional $500 to $1,000 a month-ish. And all of a sudden they're like part-time in their work. Like they start taking time from there to put in their coaching, and then more. And then all of a sudden, all of their income, or most of it, comes from coaching. And then that coaching ties into like my responsibility to my family, my to my finances, my retirement, all those things. It's like, wait a minute. Oh,
You keep making these sounds and gestures that really call out how you can feel when the stakes are higher, and when you're, like you said, you're kind of out of alignment, or you haven't figured all this out yet. It's like a moment of stress. It's that SHIT moment. And you may not always know what to do with it, but you can feel it. And sometimes you don't feel, you don't know exactly what it is, but you can feel it. And I've seen this a lot as the coaching market has just gotten bigger and bigger. Like there are so many online coaches and trainers now that it is hard to stand out.
yeah.
And so when someone starts getting to this, I mean, you could look on Instagram and you can have your pick of online coaches. You can search online for your pick of online coaches. And for the person trying to be an online coach and for the person trying to find one, there are so many different things that people value. And so starting with the V part, how do you suggest people start to identify what their values are?
So to understand kind of at least how I think of values, a value, like, because there's a lot of different definitions and terms and ideas. Just like this, the whole VIP is what am I about? Values are like things I care about and things I have strong feelings about.
Okay.
So you'll often see like lists of single words, family or, duty or honor. And oftentimes like colleges or businesses, like they'll identify these one word values.
Yeah.
And I think that's true insofar as these are the things we care about. But I think they're best expressed almost as value statements or phrases. It's like, so I have the word, courage, but what does that mean to me? How does courage express itself?
Yeah. Courage sounds like it would read really well on a website or just anywhere with a picture of a lion. What does it actually mean?
Yes. So like the whole Sigma male grind set, hustle, like the word hustle everywhere. What does hustle mean? Like for like So for me, like autonomy is a strong one for me.
Ooh.
For myself and for my clients and where that fits. But autonomy, what does that mean? Do they write their own programming? Like when it comes down to brass tacks, how do I think of it? How do I phrase it? And then what does that look like in actions? That's kind of where values fit.
Mm-hmm. Do you have an example in addition to like what's your phrase for autonomy or statement?
So for autonomy, and it kind of ties into that client-centeredness that we have, client-centered coaching for quality of life for life. For me, autonomy is centering the individual as the leader of their choice.
Ooh.
They're the leader of their choices. So they may be, we're not, all knowing. So we're integrating information and, other people's expectations and duties and responsibilities, and all those kind of come together. But in the end, the individual is responsible for making their choice.
Mm-hmm.
So as a coach, I have autonomy in the kind of clients I work with and the career path that I take. At least I try to exercise that as best I can. I can say yes, I can say no, and I fight for that. But with my clients, like they are the autonomous center. I think I had a client, this was years back, and we were working together and nothing was quite settling. It was like trying to find this and trying to find that. Like nothing was quite right. Every month it was, okay, let's tweak this. Let's go in a totally different direction based on these are my needs. This is what's different. And then finally at one point they're like, I'll be perfectly honest with you. I don't think I need coaching right now. I think I need to get a better relationship with my family. Like, I think I need to go off grid, actually. Like, I need to spend more time local and probably surf.
Wow.
They're like, that's going to be better for my, my mental health. And I'm like, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Allowing the client to say, this is what I need. And as a coach, I can participate in that, maybe. Or if not, you're you.
How did you come to realize that was one of your values?
So I used to argue on the internet a lot more.
Oh.
I don't do that. I don't do a lot of arguing anymore because I realized one day at first I went through waving back and forth like, oh, like this is important, talking about that. And then like, this is a total waste of time and blah, blah, blah. Nowadays, and this started almost like at the beginning of the pandemic. I realized that if I got upset about something, like outrage, just that kind of like, instead of typing it out, I would write on a piece of paper, what does this say about me? Oh. Like why do I care about this so much?
Mm-hmm.
And so many of the things, there's some people I hate follow. Like I never reply, I never comment, like they're professionals in the fitness industry. And because they say things that are so misaligned with my values, but they say it so well.
Oh,
and
wow.
they get likes and shares. And so when I see that, I kept finding all these things I didn't resonate with. And I'm like, what it all comes down to is, or what a lot of that came down to was autonomy. Telling the client, you are wrong, or the potential client, because these were marketing kind of and like branding sort of stuff, telling the client, you were wrong about what you need. I have your answer.
Mm-hmm. That's an interesting way to go about it.
I find that kind of like for me, sitting down and writing my thoughts down in a journal or taking a test, like the Myers-Briggs or, something like that, the Harry Potter houses. I never really quite connected with that way of finding out about yourself.
Yeah.
But that's sort of like, as you go, well, that one caught my attention. That one has always clicked with me better.
So you got really aware of why certain things were causing reactions and where that was coming from. Just cool. I've been really interested in like digging into figuring out what people want, because I don't think a lot of people, one, realize it's okay to figure out what you want, and then two, figure out how to get what they want in an ecosystem of working with different people and different resources. I think a lot of people are kind of buried by shoulds and kind of expectations that they put on themselves and what they accept from other people. And I think it's easier sometimes to figure out or to answer the question of, what do you not want? And that can kind of help ruling out things. And it sounds like that's where you got some work done is you said, I don't want what this person is selling.
Yeah. Like in many ways, like literally that exact thing that you're hit with a barrage of products and you feel that hesitancy, like I don't ugh.
Mm-hmm.
And that feeling of ugh. Sometimes it's not warranted. Like we have to reflect on it. Sometimes it's like I'm just hesitant because it's unfamiliar. I'm hesitant because
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
there are shoulds on me that tell me I shouldn't like this thing or shouldn't care about this thing. But sometimes it's like, no, that's just not me.
Yep. And that's okay.
And it's interesting that you find like, helping people get to the things that they really need, the things that they want, getting past that's like that's an expression of a value. That's an expression of something that you care about.
Definitely. Yeah. Because I think people can more enjoy what they're doing when it's what they are okay with wanting. And it's like, it goes along with nutrition. It goes along with your training, it goes along with your finances. Like it allows you to prioritize really well when you are okay with knowing what you want and okay with going for it. And that comes through, like, when you're hanging out with someone and they're just wishy-washy and there's always kind of chasing a weird fad, or they just decided somewhere that this will make them feel good and then it doesn't make them feel good. And like, you can tell. And then you can tell when you're around someone who is just like totally clear with who they are and what's important to them. And when you're in a relationship with a coach, you'll pick up on that. If your coach is clear on what's important to them and how they're going to communicate with you and how they're going to build their relationship with you, you can pick up on that too. It's not always outward, but it's that feeling, it's that gut feeling where you're just like, yeah, something's not right here.
I hear that naturally. Like I hear so many threads from that because it's so important. Like on the one hand, it's the part of identifying our values it's true for our clients, helping them get to, to their values, what they actually care about. It's true for anyone pursuing anything really where they feel resistance.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Where they feel resistance and friction when there's no external friction. There's no reason I can't do this thing, but I can't do this thing.
Yeah.
And when you said like your coach doesn't always, you can feel when the coach knows how they're going to build a relationship. They're consistent in their practice. They present themselves. And that I think comes from when a coach is clear in their own values, whether they know it or not, and they've exercised their values. They've practiced it. They do it again and again until it's the groove of it's become part of their daily practice.
Oh yeah, I love that consistency. I think that's how you know that someone has something really well articulated for themselves and in their habits is it shows up with consistency. And like you said, whether they know it or not.
Yeah.
That's neat. And sometimes you already, like, part of this exercise probably is there are values. There are things that you value as your habits identify. And I think you're going to talk about this at some point too, but being aware of what those habits are will tell you what your values are.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's a hard thing to see.
Yeah. Sometimes it's the hardest. I'm taking a look at that.
Yeah. So what about the identity? How do people figure out who am I? I'm thinking like the Zoolander scene when he's staring into the puddle. Who am I?
That is such a great reference. That is such an underrated quotable movie. So if the whole thing is like, what am I about? Then for me, identity is like, my identities are, where am I about these things and who am I about them with?
Ooh.
So anywhere we have a role, anywhere we have a title that we agree with, that we hold on to. So like strongly enough that we're like, yeah, that's me. So me as a father, me as a son, oftentimes they'll be parallel to each other. You can have a coaching identity and a client identity, both at the same time if you have a coach. And like, I think there's all sorts of psychological theories and schools. But I think sometimes we even have different headspaces in these different things. Like we can be in the boardroom or in the office, like a very clear leader. And then we don't want to lead as a client.
Sure.
And so our client, we're like, oh yeah, this guy's a CEO, or he's a top athlete. He's going to be engaged and I need to be on point, blah, blah, blah.
Mm-hmm.
And they kind of check the box in their training. They're just like, give me the program. I don't want to talk about it. And it's like, oh, these are the different roles, and the different headspace that they're in when they play these roles.
Totally. I totally notice I do that on my own. I compartmentalize, like, I like my workout stuff to come in through one email and I like my work stuff to come in through another email. And like, it's very compartmentalized.
It's funny though, right? Because it's still us.
Yeah.
I think that's probably healthier to have, or at least, if that works for you, if that fits for you, I think it's probably healthier. Like, this is the channel that I receive communication in this way, or this is the way I'm going to be in this way, instead of just being open to all people. Like, hey, you can message me, text me, email me, whatever. I'll be a coach in all these places.
Yeah. That can push some boundaries.
Yeah. It's an interesting thought where it's an interesting conflict where our coach identity, because there's a lot of overlap between being a coach and a parent. We teach and we guide and we kind of but we have to give them space for their own autonomy. So there's overlap between the skills and the role of being a coach and a parent, but I'm not my kid's coach. And I don't want, there are some aspects of my coaching personality that I don't want to bring to a 2-year-old. Many that I do, but some that I don't. So we have to hold those spaces and those boundaries. Yeah.
That's probably an interesting one when someone goes from being, full-time lifter to full-time lifter, part-time coach, part-time everything else, where it was your lifting experience that made you want to start coaching. And so some people, I think, they might tell themselves they can't coach because they're not the strongest person in the room or because they're not as strong as this other person. And I think that might be where the two identities have to start separating. While one provides value to the other and the other way around, I think it's good to let yourself be a lifter, learn what you can there, and let yourself be a coach, because when you're coaching, you're doing it for other people. You're lifting for yourself. You're coaching for other people.
Yeah. We see this at the Barbell Academy all the time. People who start coaching friends and family.
Mm-hmm.
How do we navigate the boundaries between our coaching relationship and our spouse relationship?
How do they, CJ?
Right? And we talked about this in podcast past a little bit, and it keeps coming up because it's such an important question. I don't think it's wise. I don't think it can be done really to completely separate them. Because they're still who they are. It would be weird to be like, I'm in your coach's hat. I want you to pretend like you don't know me. Like a role play sort of thing. Yeah. Huh?
I know too much about you to trust everything you're telling me about squatting.
Where I think people get it wrong though, and this is something about identities and values too, the overlap between our identities and values. It's what am I about when I'm in this role? Ideally, it should be aligned with what I'm about as a person. So if I'm uncertain, if I'm a novice coach, if I'm still learning, why do I have to think that coaching has to be this expert? I have all the answers. I'm bringing it all to the table. You should do what you must do what I tell you. We can bring that curiosity and that uncertainty and that and bring that to our coaching relationship and hold and blend a lot better with coaching our friends, coaching our spouse, coaching a coworker, than instead trying to fake what we think the identity should be instead of what it is.
Yeah, what we think the identity should be. Yeah, lots of red flags in that one. Because when it comes down to you have to be authentic. You have to be authentic with what you know and what you don't know. And that's another thing you'll pick up with a coach who I think doesn't have it all figured out yet, is they claim to know everything. Like you said, they say that they're an expert. And we've said this before, Andrew said this before, expert means that you're done. You figured it all out. You know it all. And man, you and I have both been coaching for a long ass time. And we have a lot more to learn.
Yeah. You use the word authentic, and it's kind of funny. I always want to know like what people mean when they say authentic. And it just started clicking for me a few months ago. For a long time, I didn't like the word. It felt like very woo, right? You know, your authentic self. But for me, it's almost your values, your identities, and your priorities are aligned. When you are a coach, you are the same kind of coach who believes similar things as you do as a father. You're just doing things differently, you know, or as a mother or as a sister or as a brother. And the things that you're doing in your day are serving and supporting and aligned with your values and your identities. Like when you're those things, you're authentic.
And you're getting to express it in the different areas of your life, but it's consistent in different arenas.
Expressed through an identity, you know, expressed in a moment. Yeah, I like that.
That's funny. Authentic was a word you didn't like for a while. That's a big one. That's like me and empower. For some reason, I hate the word empower.
Yes.
Like, it gets under my skin, but it's like totally what we do. It's such a great way to say something, but man, I don't want to hear it.
I'm with you. I hear you.
What about the priorities?
So the priorities, there's sort of how we define our daily actions, or the boxes. To me, they're the boxes that we put our daily actions into.
Oh, okay.
So, you know, your priorities, they align with your values and they support your identities. But your priorities are where you can fit specific things. When I've done time tracking for myself, like just time auditing and seeing where am I putting my time, all of a sudden you find yourself like, ooh, I can't like label every single thing independently for what it is. They start, you know, collecting into boxes. One of my priorities is family. One of my priorities is the relationships. So like there's a few core relationships that I want to maintain and keep, you know, at a steady level and keep contact with. My work, my training, and I have a social friendships category, which actually fits my rucking community pretty much right now.
Oh, cool. Mm-hmm.
And so these priorities are aligned with my identities. And when I'm doing something that is not in one of those boxes, like when I'm time tracking, there's that moment like, why am I doing this?
Yeah.
It's not one of my priorities. Sometimes it's right. Like open, just play can be, you know, for the self. That a self can be a priority. Absolutely.
Totally.
Travel's not a priority for me. I don't care. You know, I don't need to see, it's not a big thing for me. So, that one, some people I've seen that's one of their first priorities.
Mm-hmm.
For me, that's not in the book. So all of it, like when you have your priorities dialed in, you can make conscious choices like, nah, this is my explore. This is my 20%, or this is outside of my priorities box, but I want to do it anyway. But you can kind of make those choices intentionally.
Yeah. We found as the company, we identify our annual and 1 to 3 year priorities, which has been so useful because there is so much we can do. You know, like there's just so much that we want to do, but we're constrained because there are only so many of us. We only have so much time and we only have so many resources to put into it. So we have to come up with priorities to make sure we're actually moving towards something. Because if we're all chasing different things, then we're hardly going to make any progress. But if we're all working together on priorities that we've kind of come together on, like, then we actually make progress because we can say no. Sometimes it's too bad to say no to something, but it also can be really good.
It's probably the most important part. I don't know if I could say the most important part, but I think you just drew out, at least for priorities, the most important part, which is priorities clarify what we say no to, what we won't do, what isn't a good use of our time. Just like with our identities, who am I not? With your values, what do I not believe in? Like, and you know, what would feel outside of my values? Like that may even be more important and not going to say easier, but clearer than picking out yes. Because when your priorities are clear, all of a sudden you have a lot of opportunities that fit within your priorities. You might, but the clearer they get and the farther you go, the narrower and narrower, you know, your yes options become, and the more intense they become, and the more no options, just like, nope.
And it doesn't even feel bad. You're just like, no, thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I could do a million things. I'm not going to be a champion surfer. I'm not going to be a skateboarder. I'm not going to be a paraglider. Like at this point, those are not priorities for me. So the fact that I'm not paragliding right now gives me no stress. There's no FOMO.
There's no FOMO.
That I'm not paragliding right now because I that's not a priority for me.
Yeah. And for a new coach, I can see how this would be important because you feel like you should be able to serve everybody. And for a while, you probably do need to serve whoever wants to give you money. Because you need to establish your experience, you need to get your reputation out there. But then there comes a point, I think, where you might get overreached, where you've come out in the market at a certain price point, kind of reflective of your level of experience and your background. But then you've elevated your level of experience and your price point is a little bit lagging. And so I think at that point, that's a good exercise of coming back to your VIP and being like, okay, who do I actually really want to keep working with? What is kind of out of whack here? Like you might be overreached schedule wise too, where you're working 7 days a week and your other priorities are kind of falling into the shadow. And you get to shore. And like you said, what do I want to keep saying yes to?
Yeah.
And then start saying no to everything else.
No, I totally agree with that. I think a mistake we can make is assuming that any of these are going to be constant. I was actually, so a few years back, the audience won't be able to see this, but, I went through like some worksheet exercises and wrote down values, unique abilities. It was from Dr. John Berardi's Changemaker book. So I was going through and doing some of the exercises there and I compared them to what they are today, like doing the exercise. And the biggest changes, like the words changed, but the core ideas stayed the same. And what was interesting was how the phrases that guided each one of them changed. I think the same is true of our priorities. A novice coach's priorities are not, a senior coach's or respected coaches, someone who's leading an organization. Like if that happens, if you become an entrepreneur coach and now you're running a company of X number of people, your priorities change.
Big time. Yeah. And that's okay. Because that's how you get more done. Like you said, they become more intense. I really like that. In the notes for the show, you had some cool questions that we could ask ourselves to help us figure out some of these very important things. Let's see. You had some great questions on the awareness net. What's that? Tell me about the awareness net.
So we talked it came up a little bit earlier when it came to values, but the awareness net is instead of trying to like pick a value out of a list, trying to identify like identities and priorities, it's figuring out what are my values, identities, and priorities as they come to me. It's that moment. Reflection has value, and there are some reflection exercises in there like that I kind of mentioned in the show notes or in the pre-notes, but also it's the awareness of, okay, what do I resonate with? What do I respond to? So the positive dragnet in every way. So if there's a person I resonate with, like, what does that say about me? What does that say? Like, why in our relationship? What is it about the shared connection that we have that I resonate with? If there's an idea that I resonate with, and if there's let's say for coaches, there's a client. It's like, man, I love working with this client. And instead of being like, it was just each week, we're like, oh, thank God, it's going to be Sarah today. And this session's going to be fun and we're going to have a great time. And you just kind of, you just survive each week until you see that same client again. Instead thinking like, how can I get more Sarahs?
Yes, totally.
And the same thing with the negative, like I made the joke about hate following, but it's honestly keeping that awareness again, people that feel like a drain, like I'm done with this client session and I'm just like, oh, get me out of here.
Yeah.
Keeping that dragnet. And then priorities. When I look at my time, when I look at, I guess this actually be a perfect moment to talk about it, is there's the awareness net, the dragnet as I'm going through my life. And then there's moments when we can kind of force it a little bit by doing an audit.
Okay.
The biggest ones that I find are auditing our time and our money.
Mm-hmm.
So as a coach, like one thing I've done a couple of times is audit the different buckets of my work time
Okay.
and identified how much did I enjoy this time block. So back when I was coaching CrossFit 760, a CrossFit local gym here in Oceanside or Carlsbad, I had coaching work at 4 different facilities. I was doing
Wow.
online coaching. I was had some in-person sessions and drop-ins from people, locally. Was doing some management work because I was like managing the 4 local facilities while they did some outside work with. So I like had 6 different work hats, and I did a time audit to be like, where's all this time going? How much is it worth it to me? How much do I enjoy each? And all of a sudden I realized I was putting a lot of time into things that I absolutely hated, that wasn't aligned with my future career, what I wanted to go, and wasn't going anywhere.
Yeah, that's huge. That probably triggered some life changes.
Yeah, it did. It did in terms of, and it was actually a key factor to, we were a ways away. So Christina was pregnant with our first, at the time when I did this. She was a first trimester pretty early. So there was still plenty of time I had to live in that environment, but I had to think, and I went to, my bosses there at the gym and negotiated. And I'm like, hey, I've decided that when Dylan is born, I want to be almost entirely, like mostly remote or almost entirely remote. And, and we negotiated the off ramp and everything went really well there. But it took that second to audit my time, to just look at it in the face and go, oh, I don't like this.
Yeah, that's big. And then what's the other big resource that you can audit?
The money.
Yeah, this one is so interesting.
So going through, there are a million apps that can help with this, Mint or whatever. It doesn't really matter how you do it. But I thought it was such an insight because I started saving a lot of money because I realized I keep the subscription open, like cancel that. Like that, great.
Yeah.
But where it's more indirect and it's not always accurate, but where we put our money tells us a lot about our current boxes. When you're like, wait a minute, I'm spending $300 a month, for instance, on various online newspaper subscriptions and magazine subscriptions and the various media services, the streaming, the Netflixes and the, YouTube Reds and all that. Like when I look at all of them and I'm spending $300 to have people funnel information in my ear that I can't handle, like, I already can't handle the overflow of information. Why am I paying people to pump it like straight to me?
Totally.
A money audit was really an eye opener for me as well. And it's not just like, going through and mechanically, yes, this is what I spend, not like, like a reverse budget. It's more when I look at this line item on my budget, does it make me cringe? It's Marie Kondo.
Yeah.
Like, does it spark joy? Do I look at that and go, yeah, like
I can't wait. Yes.
that's a good spending of my cash. That's a good, that cost me an hour of my time and that was worth it. Or do I look at it and then go, oh yeah, no good.
Or like, man, I would way rather spend that on whatever else, more rucking.
So many coaches say like, oh, I'm not good at the business thing. I love coaching. I'm passionate about coaching, but I can't stand the business side of things. Well, audit your time, audit your money, figure out where your values and your identities and your priorities aren't aligned. And those are just 2 useful tools to kind of help with that. Oftentimes, they'll find overhead expenses that they didn't even realize that they were spending, but also they realize like, wow, maybe I don't need this much space, or I don't need this like $700 suite of expensive CRM software to run 100 clients.
Right.
Like, out of a small box CrossFit gym or whatever. All of a sudden it's like, okay, now it's not like I'm better at business. That's a business. What does business mean? It just means I've aligned my VIP with how I'm spending my money as a coach.
Totally. We'll often ask coaches what kind of clients they want to keep working with. And start to identify certain demographics that people are just really good at working at. And I think the longer you become a coach, sometimes you don't realize that you've started to get good at working with a certain demographic because it doesn't feel like work. And then there are some clients that come in and like they're just a new type of client. You're just like, whoa, I didn't realize this, but I don't know anything about this type of client. And I think that's really useful to keep asking yourself as you develop as a coach, because it's okay to kind of hone in on a certain area because you allow yourself to connect.
I'd love to know. So for you as a coach, sometimes I think people, they get us like it's going to be a demographic. I'm going to coach 25 to 35-year-old males, whatever. Oftentimes it's what problem do we solve?
Yeah.
Something like that. It's a problem. It's a sport. It's a need. Adaptive athletes, something like that. So in your case, do you feel like there's a problem that you solve or a demographic or something that you're passionate about? Or are you still like I'm pretty general and I'm happy with that?
Yeah, that's truthfully something that I've been kind of thinking a lot about lately, because I want to open up my roster again and start working with a few more clients. And I had a hard time kind of pinning down who that ideal client was, but I really like helping people become very consistent with their training. And I like supporting their consistency with their training because I think longevity and muscle building is actually one of my most important values for me as a person and then for helping people accomplish. So someone who might struggle with consistency, especially or just with a busy life or with managing with another sport and figuring out how to make training always fit in your life in a way that brings value and doesn't make you kind of put too much pressure on training where you think, I must compete at all costs. I must train at all costs. I must cancel all of my other important things. Like I want it to always fit in no matter what. I think that's one of my important things.
That's awesome. Oh, and I think it's like too often we hear the word niching down. That's another one of those terms I don't like because, it tends to become that dartboard. I'm going to choose a random age demographic with a random, anyway. But the way you pull that, it sounds general at first, but you're like, wait a minute. If I'm actually going to serve clients who are time poor and inconsistent in their training, then the level of empathy, like the skills and empathy and communication and breaking down, like I'm going to have to reach into their schedule. Like they're going to have to share like how we're going to work around their schedule and their priorities. So all of a sudden, my skills in connecting to their VIP as they reschedule their life to make this happen, that is not the same skill set as a physiological expert for an like elite aerobic endurance athlete. Those guys, they'll put in 15 hours a week training, and that's just what they do. Like consistency isn't their problem.
Right.
They're very different skill sets. So even if it sounds general like that, they're all of a sudden the Niki as a coach, like serving those people as you've been doing and, continuing to do is all of a sudden special. Like you serve a need that a lot of coaches they get really, it's like, they're not compliant.
Yeah. And they have to change the program all the time. And like, they just won't do the program where I'm just like, all right, well, I want to modify the program. Like,
yeah. And getting ahead of it, like listening for the client's indications that something's going off rails before it does, that somebody with your VIP will be a better coach for the client who has those sorts of problems. And I don't think we realize it. I think like for you, you're more empathetic anyway. And so like, maybe it's hard to see or to connect like, oh, this is, I'm better at this. Like there are people who are bad at this.
Yeah, we probably each run into that kind of person. Thank you. That was a really cool exercise. Thanks for taking me through that. What about you? What problems do you like to solve?
So right now and this ties into like my past experience. I've had a real blast working with clients prepping for military selection or for their military fitness test. And a lot of that just becomes from my, not just being in the Navy myself. I was attempting for a lateral transfer to become a Navy SEAL. So a lot of that training preparation and being, absorbed in that community, but also just rucking, obstacle course racing. Like there's so much of that experience that I really enjoyed. And it actually made that training a lot more fun. So programming is a lot more fun. And when, connecting with those clients and the problems that they face, deployments and those issues, I'm like, okay, that feels a bit more, that feels like more grounded. And for me, there's the definite service, like this person achieved something that they weren't confident they'd be able to achieve professionally because of what I did. There's, because of what we did, really what they did, but what I was, able to contribute and bring to the table helped with that.
That's neat. And those clients have very specific things that they must do, very specific goals. And I think that's challenging because not every person comes in the same level of physical capacity when you first start working that. But no matter what, they need to get to here, and you need to get them there, or at least help them.
Yeah, there is a level of consequences, to that, so coaching VIP, if you want lower consequences, like if that feels better to navigate lower consequence, but still potentially high impact for long-term health and happiness.
Mm-hmm.
So low consequences, you have to figure out how to get consistency out of someone who doesn't feel urgency.
Mm-hmm.
You're working with someone high consequences, you probably don't have to focus so much on consistency. They're going to do the work, but the results, and how do you track results? How do you follow results? And how do you manage the obstacles to result? It changes things.
That's true. Yeah, it's a whole different set of metrics and patterns to reinforce. It's cool.
Yeah.
I love it. Well, I hope anybody who's new at coaching, who's been coaching for a long time, thinking about coaching, I hope you start to journal on this and develop some awareness, because it's going to help you speak to your potential clients and your future clients better. And you're going to stand out more against everybody else who's out there in the market, because it will be very clear what you're trying to do for someone, and your future clients will see that immediately, and you will be able to help them better.
Yeah. It's weird. Like when in the beginning, I was using a lot of examples that I realized afterwards. I'm like, I should be using coaching examples, because finding your values, identities, and priorities really does apply to everyone, especially to our clients.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
Especially towards a lot of pretty much everything. But connecting that to a coaching career, connecting that, or just a coaching practice, a service, however you see your coaching identity, a career, a practice, a service, that is not only like a practical application of VIP, but it's a different skill set too. Because now you've got to figure out not just what's your VIP, but what's your client's VIP.
Oh yeah, and speak to that person.
And speak to that person and be speaking to that person. So when people are like, oh, how do people find me? How did you find whoever got you into lifting? Well, how do people find me? So the people that you respect, how do they talk? How do they, what do they know? And again, that tells you a lot about your VIP, but also it's like the starting point for connecting to your audience.
Yeah. Excellent.
There's if I could just shoot one
Please do.
last thought on that one. I wouldn't want coaches either to get stuck on the idea that whatever they are right now, like, okay, find your VIP, find this fixed thing. And then it's almost if we build it, they will come. Find your VIP and you'll find the right clients to it. And there's compromises sometimes. It's like, well, okay, this is the skill set that I have now. The people that I really want to work with, maybe I want to work with adaptive athletes. I'm not an adaptive athlete, like I don't have necessarily those issues before. But it's really aligned with my passion, my values. Maybe I have family members who deal with those problems. So I have some kind of personal connection to it. This is the community I want to serve. Then it's not like there's this unbridgeable gap. Like, it's not my current experience and expertise and comfort. How could I? I've got to be within my VIP, whatever that means. It's what's the next step in that direction? Is it volunteering? Is it volunteering for an adaptive athlete organization like the Special Olympics or the any one of those, or the Paralympic Games, I believe? Is it serving one client? What is that next step? Is it an education? Is it a certification? What is that first step that you can test that water? And, you do it and it feels good and it's aligned with where your VIP is at. And you're like, okay, then you take the next step. Then you take the next step. It doesn't have to be this big, grand plan, or it can look so far away, just like clients. Like getting to a 600-pound deadlift or a 500-pound deadlift may feel so far away, it's antagonizing. Well, first you got to get from 315 to 320.
Yeah.
And 320 to 350.
Yeah.
And that, when it's aligned with your VIP, you can enjoy it along the way. You can be satisfied along the way.
You can grow.
Yeah.
Instead of engraving, you're not engraving anything in the wall. You don't have to take it down every time you want to change. Like, let it go with you.
Yeah, you can be authentic. But I actually really like that metaphor, engraved into the wall, because so often, like, you write up your 5-year plan, or you do something like that, and when it doesn't happen that way, when something else occurs that bends the plan, you're just like, I failed the plan.
Yeah.
I failed to meet the plan. Or you get halfway along the plan and you're like, this isn't aligned with my VIP anymore. I don't like this anymore, but I'm going to power through because that's the plan.
Mm-hmm. That whole forcing thing, I don't recommend.
No.
Unless it's important to you for a reason that you agree with. Yeah. Awesome. Anything else to add?
Not really. Like, I feel like you and I could talk about this forever, but in terms of...
yeah. This is always running through my brain like 24 hours a day.
in terms of the big picture stuff, it's a start. And, there's more to be said, but there's more time to say it. So hopefully we'll get the opportunity to talk more. Oh, yeah, we definitely will. So if you're curious about your future coaching career or connecting with yourself and your clients, stay tuned for more. If you enjoyed this episode and the Barbell Logic podcast, please leave us a review. Hopefully we deserve a 5-star review on whichever medium you're listening. And that's it for today. Thank you, CJ, for being here. And thank you, everybody, for listening. We'll see you next time. Thank you, Niki.